Between Sundays.
Yes.
Missed last week because of the
roofers.
Yep.
It is between Sundays post daylight savings time.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
If you're listening and you're tired, we understand.
We're with you. Why does it hit us so hard? It's just 1 hour.
Or is it just
hype?
Man.
Maybe it's hype.
No, it's frustrating. It's accidental jet lag.
Yeah,
I went nowhere, and I'm dealing with the repercussions of a 1 hour change.
Exactly.
This is why Arizona and Hawaii are just killing it, dude.
Yeah,
They're just living their best life, not getting exhausted.
Last Sunday was great.
You're talking about 2 Sundays ago. We didn't talk about last week at all when you preached.
Yeah, we have 2 Sundays,
and we didn't talk
Ash
about
Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday either. Yeah,
Lots has been happening.
Yeah, it's good stuff. 2 Sundays ago, you preached.
I did.
Yeah. Here's what's fascinating. We've been talking a lot about this with each other and as a staff, but I mean, so most people in our church, they don't get the inside track on anything, and they don't get to see behind the curtain, because that's just like, why would you, right? But like 2 Sundays ago was really fascinating, because you dealt with something that every preacher deals with, but most people don't see, which is like you preach. We have 2 services. Your first sermon and the response and everything, and we were also having a lot of technical issues because of the building stuff. But who you were in first service was not who you were in second. No one in our church saw that besides some of the staff. But that's an interesting perspective that a lot of people don't know, that I'm still working out my sermon in first service, and then I may adjust some things, or
it's different every week.
Yeah, or I feel out a story and then I realize that story doesn't make sense, or I share a funny story, a joke about eggs, and I go, oh, that's a really good joke, I'm going to do that again next. People don't realize that we're still kind of working it. And for you last week, you really had to work it, which is very fascinating. And then the reward of that was what second service people. So do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I think that's a really cool thing that people don't realize. We're humans. We are still working on being honoring with our craft. We're trying our best to bring our best to our people, but they only see one half of that story if they only come at 9 or 11, and they don't hear about the in-between conversations and all that stuff.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm forgetting what you said in between. But first service, I had it in my head and heart. But first service, I was still, I don't know. I was in my head and heart a little bit more. Second service,
you had everything proper. It wasn't like you weren't prepared or anything like that.
I was very prepared.
What you wrote, honestly, probably could have been published, in an article about what you were talking. Very well worded, lots of structure, good content, but totally different in its expression.
Yeah.
In second service.
Yeah, in between. I mean, you really helped. You gave a very brief, really good, empowering word of some great coaching. And I'm forgetting right now what you said because it's post jet lag. But
I think I just said something to the effect of get away from your notes and be more yourself.
Yeah.
The content's great, but
because I had it all in my head.
We
and
need
heart.
more of you.
Yeah. So then second service, I just began to really look more intently at people and into people, and it was felt like I was having more of a conversation with our church more than delivering a message.
That's right.
And first service, I was delivering something, but there was a disconnect in my spirit and heart a little bit, just because I was preaching. Second service, I was seeing people and I was experiencing God doing different things in me as I'd look into people's faces. There was a lot more spontaneity as a result, and stories that just kind of came, and it was much more like a jazz solo than a classical solo.
Yeah, you knew where you were going, but you had the ability to free flow in the midst of it.
More than I ever have.
Yeah. And here's what's really interesting. So every Monday, as a staff, we'll do a stand-up, but there is a really quick conversation that happens with Kaylee, because Kaylee posts our sermons, about which sermon we want posted. So even people in our church, they have we didn't post first service, you post second. So even like we even have a choice of how we want the service to be presented. So some people are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, which is fascinating.
Yeah. I mean,
that's how it goes.
If you just read your sermon script that you work on, it would be identical. But I think something that's really powerful is to have that real connection, that jazz dynamic of, we have all the material that we've prepared and that we feel like, but it changes. Like your sermons every week are different, first and second service, even though it's the same text, the same points. There's different flavor, there's a really special dynamic.
So after your second sermon, then all of a sudden the vibe was totally different because you went off on praying in ministry time, and it was fascinating to see 20, 30 some people come up to the front. Like not like your typical, like, you know, like I think a lot of people at Vineyard, they're used to now a bunch of people going up to the front and kneeling during songs, but that was not what happened. You know, you provoked people to come up to the front and stand when they were struggling with all sorts of stuff, and all these people came up. It was almost like the reward of your authenticity was also like the freedom people felt to just...
It was a big risk for me because I tend to be a little more stagnant and gripped with notes and have a lot in my head and heart. But second service, I really just felt the need to step out and look and see.
What did that look like for people? Like, what was that? What was the prompting that you felt like while you were talking? Were you like, huh? Like I there's people that need to do something. Like
second service?
Yeah.
As like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think it allowed a lot more of there was almost a third. It was my notes and me and the Holy Spirit in a different way. So I as I looked out, I just began to sense a lot of things in particular. And there was an openness and an availability, I think, because it wasn't about getting to the end of the sermon. It was about having a conversation and responding,
being sensitive to
the people and to the Lord. And then as a result, it's also very risky. I wasn't sure of anything, but there was
I think that's the misnomer I think people in Christianity have, is thinking that when something supernatural is happening, it has to be very clear. But everything that you did 2 weeks ago is what we would teach anybody who is trying to practice their gift of words of knowledge or prophetic or healing. We would be like, hey, you're going to have to be really attuned to the simple, still voice of the Spirit, because he's probably not going to shout at you. So are you going to be sensitive enough and bold? I mean, you took a huge risk because you could have said, all right, come on up to the front, everybody who's blank, 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 and no one would have gone up, and you could have been so discouraged. And then you could have just gone, well, I don't want to be discouraged, therefore I'm not going to say anything. But instead you were like, no, we need to, I'm not the only one, come on up. And then all of a sudden, 30 some people come up and stand.
It was really beautiful. It's definitely that risk. I mean, I think especially if you can manipulate it, which you don't want to do, or you can be passive to it. And I think it was really sharp in me that day just to risk and
that's good,
to step towards that. So I don't want to preach the other way. That was a big Sunday for me in the sense of just personally feeling the need to be more authentic and free.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, we talked about this, like, I don't know why you would want to preach that way potentially ever again. Not because it was bad. Like that's the other thing too. I don't think anybody in our first service would ever say, wow, Joel's sermon was bad. I think they'd be like, that was great. Like actually you had someone come up to you on our staff and they were like, that was amazing. Like content was great. Like it wasn't, but it was the reward of faithfulness, of being a little bit more attuned, that it's like, oh, I don't want to just do a theological presentation. Like I want to be sensitive, right? Yeah, which is really great. So in a sense, it's like even Vineyard can like not hold Joel accountable, but it's like be encouraged that Joel, that you found another gear. Your car is manual, and it was like you went from first to second to third, and you had never really gotten on the 405 without traffic, and then you got on, you're like, dun, dun, dun,
get out
and
to
you
like
went.
Bakersfield, and I can put it in 6th.
Yeah.
I wasn't in 6th, but I got to 4th.
Yeah. And which is really,
yeah,
that's amazing. It's freeing.
Thanks for that, though. You gave me great coaching in between. It's good. It reminds me a lot of like my musical days of just, there are times that you read the music and it's great. And then there are times that you can just kind of open your heart and make music.
Well, that reminds me actually when you were saying that just now is I love Interstellar, the movie Interstellar. Yeah. I think the score on that is like, it may be the best ever. Like I love it because I love the score on Interstellar, not because it's so complex, but because after the movie came out and the score won all these awards, I love that now you can go to like an Interstellar orchestral thing, and they riff on, they make the songs even bigger, like ways that I've never even processed. Like, how on earth could they have turned that simple structure? And that's what I think. Like, that's kind of like what it feels like. Is like when you do this, when you preach this way, it brings so much more possibility out, which is so cool.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. You do that very well in between every service. Is very there are always moments of spontaneity where you have a lot of connection. I feel
that's the goal.
It's really good,
and it comes out a little bit more when you're actually in environments that aren't your local church, like because you know everybody in the room, usually, or not everybody. You know a good chunk of people in the room. When you're at like a conference, it's totally different because then you can riff like crazy. Usually they have a longer timeline too. Like you can preach for like 45 or 50 minutes. And the risk is worth it because also the people in the room come with anticipation. Like I don't think that every Sunday people come to Vineyard with high anticipation. Yeah. Some people are just there. You go to a conference, people are like, I'm here.
Yeah, they flew in. There's faith. There's anticipation.
Yeah. And so that's also when it gets, because so then when you start flexing that muscle a little bit more, and you're in an environment where faith is heightened, then you're like, ooh, okay, some stuff can happen here. So it's pretty cool.
Ash Wednesday was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you and Josh and Jacob did a really good job at planning that, and I feel like we had a noon and a 5, which I feel like first time ever.
First time ever. I mean, it was a good. Yeah, I was excited about the turnout because it's a weird time.
For those people who didn't go to Ash Wednesday, what was like the thing that you felt like wow, yes, that we did what we wanted to do. We accomplished. What was the thing
that we accomplished?
Yeah.
I think we began to maybe see God more clearly and ourselves more clearly.
So what did that look like for people tangibly?
Hopefully just a recognition that we're going to die, every one of us, and that we are not self-made, immortal, invincible people, that we are dust. I mean, that's kind of what we shared real briefly, and that yet God breathes life into our dust.
So why did we do that? We're like a Vineyard church that pretty much is like birthed out of a movement that would have never done an Ash Wednesday 50 years ago because we were such a rebel movement.
Yes.
And now we're like tapping into a practice that the church has been doing for like 1,700 years.
And millions of Christians around the world last week.
Like I just listened to like this famous, he's like a Christian apologist on YouTube, and he was like, the 7 concerns I have with Ash Wednesday.
Oh.
Because he's like a super Calvary guy.
Okay. And
his big thing was just like, you don't always need to be so repentant because of the cross. And it's like, but his view is very Calvary. He is an anti-establishment, non-denominational. You know what I mean? Like that world. So why on earth would a anti-establishment, charismatic, functionally non-denominational church? We are not Anglican. We are not Catholic.
Yeah.
We are not Lutheran. We are not Episcopal. Why would we do, and we are not actively doing Lent. People are, but we still did Ash Wednesday.
Yeah, that's good.
Why did we do that?
I don't know. Why did we?
You tell me. Why do you like it so much, you weirdo?
I love it. I just think there are those times in the church calendar that are really rich and vital for us to enter into and to have rhythms of, and it prepares us for the events of Good Friday and Easter. It's just off our radar. Suddenly we're going to experience Good Friday without the recognition that we really need a Savior. So this sets us apart. It also helps us. There's something about the symbolism of the ash. It marks us. Very powerful, very symbolic.
Yeah.
And we join with what the global church is doing. It's very, that's very rich. There's something about, I mean, you're passionate about it too.
Yeah.
So why are you?
I think that mine goes back to evangelistic like worldviews. Like I think that if people, I'm a pretty strong believer that if Christians are regularly reminded of our humanity and our brokenness, it compels us to be more aware of our lost friends and our lost neighbors. So I think it's formational. I think that I think it makes us a better neighbor. That's like I think that when you get marked with that, my boys were really frustrated because they got marked with ashes after school. Like they were like, so Ezekiel was like, I want to go to school with this.
Wow, yeah.
So I think that to me is like, I like it not because it's so sacramental in the sense of everybody does it, so we do it. I like it because it gives you a good, healthy perspective of who you are. And hopefully it gives you a self-awareness to be like, wow, like if I'm going to ash, if I'll be dust without Jesus, then so will my neighbor.
Yeah, that was.
So I think that's a really important formational practice. Just always being reminded of our depravity and our brokenness, and anytime you can do something that's symbolic and it reminds you of that, it's just really. I think it's just really, really, really important. Yeah. And sometimes things need to be really explicit, which is why Ash Wednesday is the way that it is. But like, even our Sundays have liturgical elements to them, whether or not we tell people that we are doing a confession of sin and an assurance of pardon and a call to worship. And like, we very much have a Anglican liturgy in our service that's very implicit. It's not explicit. But like, I've been to quite a few pseudo-Anglican churches and they have less liturgical elements than we do. They do them by saying, now we are going to do, and they have their reading. But like every single week, like we have specific things being said in a specific order that they're being said. We have a kind of triumphant end to our service right before our last song that is always a declaration and a reminder of the glory of Jesus and his sending us, and so that we have a benediction. We've got, and I think that Ash Wednesday is a more explicit liturgical. I mean, but liturgy, there was this book that came out way back in the day by Mike Cosper called Rhythms of Grace. And his big thing is just like everything is liturgy. Yeah. Like liturgy is life. Liturgy is the cadence and rhythm by which you live your life. And so it's like, if we all have liturgy, something is forming us. The rhythms of our life are determining the outcome of our life. If you regularly host dinners for your neighborhood, you will then liturgically, in the rhythm, become an outwardly focused person because you're increasing in your hospitality regularly. And so the cadence, the 4/4, the 6/8 rhythm of discipleship, formation, confession, repentance, surrender, I think that is what Ash Wednesday just becomes. It's a really good, which is why, like, are we super hyped on Lent? No. Not because it's not formational, but it's like Ash Wednesday gave us a chance to hone in on something.
Yeah, that's good.
Good Friday will give us a chance to hone in on that. You know, and everybody will probably go, wow, our Good Friday is so dark. It's so heavy. And it's like, well, we're going to go down because the amount that we're going to go up on Easter is going to be foolish. So it's like, let's have these corresponding emotional realities.
Well, and how do we go up if we didn't go down?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing to me is like Christians in evangelicalism in America really like to go up. We're really afraid to go down. And they're always like, I think I've always found this really funny is like, there's a fear that if your Good Friday service is so heavy, that it's just going to really discourage people. And it's like, but isn't that like appropriate? Like, I don't want to discourage people to believe that Jesus is still in the grave. That's not true. But I do want people to like I don't meet people that just have great weeks all the time. I meet people that have great days, but their week is usually really hard. And I think that there's a really good, like, I think it's just good to say, let's get low.
Yeah.
Let's get low.
I think it's good to have a little tension in the story too.
Yeah.
It's fine to not have the whole story told.
I didn't have the whole story told yesterday in my sermon. We stopped halfway through the chapter.
Yeah.
It's like, no, that's enough.
Yeah.
We've already seen so much in this story. We don't need to keep going right now. We got to talk about, whatever. So it's good. I'm glad people came. Hopefully next year, people have a better glimpse of what it was. And we might even end up doing one like before work.
Yeah, we could do one before work and school.
Yeah, do like a 7 a.m.
Wear the
8
Ash all day.
a.m. Yeah.
We even have visitors come to Ash Wednesday.
Yeah.
There's so many new people have been coming just in general, but even Ash Wednesday. It's really, really awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff. So it was good. I was really proud of you guys for creating a service that was not distracting, that had all the elements that you'd want, that was done with excellence, like performatively. It was very beautiful. It's really good. So, and I think everybody appreciated that we were also honoring with their time. Like you know this about me. Like I just can't stand the whole like the Spirit can only show up if we like are lazy and we just take way too long, or nothing can be done effectively in 30 minutes or less. And it's like that's just a load of like
we ended exactly at 45 minutes, I think.
Yeah, which is okay. Like
even our encounter nights, like 1 hour.
Yeah,
and there's so much that can happen. We don't need to linger, and
I think that's a weirdo cultural thing. Of like the Lord can only do something when we've revved the engine like 55 times. And it's like, preaching the same thing, right? Yeah. Like, do you really need to preach for an hour and 20 minutes to get your point across? Like, and here's the deal. Our movement, the Vineyard is a culprit in that. Like, does every single national conference, like session need to be 2.5 hours? Like, I get it, but like, I don't know. I've just been in too many environments where like the assumption is that 2.5 hours is the sweet spot. And it's like, but it can be an hour and 15. I promise I've been in those environments that are just as powerful. And it's just like someone spent another hour in a planning meeting trimming the fat. Like, do we really need to do announcements that way? Like, do we really need it to be that? Do we really need a sponsor video there? Like, So I think that, Ash, it was really pleasant that you guys spent 45 minutes on the dot caring for the people who have work at 1. So it was really good. It was really good. So, yeah.
I'm excited about that. Excited that this Sunday, Brienne's preaching.
Yeah.
Super exciting. And, that's really exciting. It's refreshing. It'll be great.
Yeah, it'll be really good to have her. We've had Jesse, you, me, Brienne. You'll be back in, I think, 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah. Joseph's continuing.
Yeah, because I'll be out of town, so you'll be preaching that Sunday.
Okay.
That'll be great. Yeah, I think Brienne's excited. It'll be good to have her up there.
Yeah, and we're in the middle of Women's History Month. Or National...
I don't think it's Women's History Month.
No, what is it?
Oh, well, there was like women's... No, there was like a National Women's Day, which I think was on Saturday. Okay. Because I was watching a hockey game, and all of the announcers were women, and they were just like celebrating women's hockey and stuff. So I think is this month is like celebrating Women's History National, something like that?
I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah. Well, last month was Black History Month, so yeah, it's cool. I mean, we didn't strategically put women up there because it's this month. Yeah.
But I do love that we have women preaching, and that's always been something that our church has really embraced.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we do it. Obviously, we're not just haphazardly putting women up there for strange reasons. Like, we think that it's biblical and honoring and important to our movement, important to a lot of different things, which again, we recognize that there are Christians in this world that do not agree with us, which is totally fine. Like, but yeah, it's super important. I mean, even when we were pastoring our last church, that was a thing that I cared deeply about and wanted to do all that we could to make sure that the women in our church felt heard and loved and empowered, and that there wasn't glass ceilings, just because they were a female, right?
Yep.
So
there sometimes is in the church.
Yeah, and it's weird, right? Because like sometimes I've been in environments where like there are certain people who want leadership and then they blame their lack of leadership on something they perceive to be.
Yeah.
I've met plenty of young female leaders that are just like, no one's going to empower me because I'm a girl. And it's like, no, the reason why you're not going to get empowered is because of the mentality you literally just said. No one's going to. It's a very victim defeatist mentality. And oftentimes that's just really hard to correct, or it's really hard to like help empower someone who just defaults to no one cares about me. I therefore blank. Same thing with like a young person. If they're like, no one's ever going to give me leadership because I'm young. And you're like, well, I don't even know if I can work with that. Like if you're eager and humble, like that's all that the Lord is asking, and wise, you know, like, or at least wise enough, like, or even like leaders from like different ethnic groups. Like if someone is strong and passionate and humble and eager, you're going to get more chances in any environment than if you make your difference a thing. Then it gets super weird. You know, like it's strange. It becomes like it just becomes a false, because then you're motivating people to put you in leadership because of things that don't even matter. Like they're not intangibles of your holiness and your faithfulness. They're like, oh, your gender is one thing or your skin color is one thing, therefore. And it's like, I don't see Jesus doing that. I see Jesus empowering people who just are faithful and they just want to be, they want to use whatever the Lord has given them, you know? So it'll be exciting. And I do hope that over the years, women in our church find freedom to be themselves. And luckily we're in a city where women are very much leaders in a lot of realms. Like it's not like we're in rural wherever where most of the women are stay-at-home mom. You know what I mean? Like we're in a city where like we have got some powerful, strong women in our church environment,
and that's very exciting.
Yeah, it's super cool.
I remember the I think the first time, or talk about like at your previous church. Yeah. The first time a woman spoke, like how you set that up or what you did.
Well, the first time ever was not that epic. We were doing like a series on like the start of our church and where it got to, which was it was like, honestly, I can't even remember. Brienne and I were on the stage together, and I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but we talked a lot about just like where we came from, the vision that God gave us for our church.
Right at the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, it may have been like 2 years in.
Okay.
So here's the funny thing. So I'll get to what you're asking in a second. So the way I preach, and the way I used to preach more specifically, people come with an assumption of who I am because of that. So like I read, and I'm kind of like, when I read, I'm referring to Hebrew and I'm referring to Greek and I'm working through it and I'm exegeting it. And because of how I preach and because I get excited about the authority of the scriptures and the authenticity of it and the inspiration, and a lot of people then make a couple of like assumptions about me, because their assumptions are based into like an isolated evangelical worldview. So they'll be like, oh, because Josh preaches more often than not line by line, he therefore is, and they've got like 7 different things, right? So he's politically conservative, and he's not pro women in ministry, and he's also probably not going to be super charismatic, because they assume that type of preaching or that type of person. I'm very strong. I have a strong personality. I'm very opinionated. You're not going to like half of the things that I say most of the time. Relationally, we're probably going to have conflict if you aren't willing to just hear what I'm thinking. Like, I don't hold back because I think that's dishonorable to someone. Like, if you've got a problem, I'm going to say it. Like, that's just, and so people assume that comes with the territory of all these other subcategories. Yeah. So early on in our church, we planted in a very conservative movement that was not pro women. Like, we were the black sheep. I had women on our elder team, and we were preparing to have women, and we weren't just going to throw Brienne up right away because she needed to be trained, because I was trained formally in like 3 different spheres. I had internships, residencies, and oh no, our fire alarm's going off. How did they not? Yeah, Megan's going to have to go run down and silence it. It's fine. We'll just keep talking, but I make sure.
I need to get the phone when they call.
Oh, geez. So if you're listening right now, Vineyard, our fire alarm's going off because somebody had smoke, or not smoke, somebody had dust probably fly up and just mess with something really bad. So I'm going to talk through. See, now they're going to be grinding on the roof still. So endure with us as we talk, as we wait for this.
I wonder if they can hear it.
It got silenced.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So, anyways, we're in a movement that's not pro women. And like even in the movement
back then,
yeah.
Right,
So
not the Vineyard.
We're a black sheep. The church that we planted from was also pro women in ministry, but they were also a black sheep in their movement. And they would say they're not anti women, but you can't be a senior pastor in the movement. And the majority of them would very much think that women should not be able to preach,
except to kids or something.
Yeah. So it's complementarian in its entirety. And here's the deal: I'm actually decently complementarian. I just think that it changes I think that women in leadership and preaching, we've already talked about my view on preaching. Preaching is not this like, I'm God, a messenger from the mountain Zion. I'm not doing that. So in our movement, it already had a little bit of like a red flag to it or a yellow flag to it. So all these people in our church also had a little bit of an assumption like, oh, well, Josh is, therefore. And so we ordained a couple of ladies on our staff, and right away people left the church. I'm not going to have a female pastor in my church. And imagine that, like we're planting a church, we're young. My wife is the most upfront female leader in our entire church, and she gets licensed. She doesn't even actually preach yet, and people started leaving.
Wow.
So Brienne became the punching bag. All these ladies that came after Brienne, most of them don't realize the beat down that she got in emails. Like they all just they stood on her shoulders and they didn't realize that. And in a lot of ways, that's like really discouraging that like women really want women to thrive. But then when a woman thrives and kind of takes charge for them, a lot of women don't go back, and they don't. And I know this because I've talked with my wife, and my wife's like, the amount of times that I took a hit for someone and then no one really seemed to care, was it just discount, like it's just, you're not celebrating the people. It's honestly, it lacks honor. Like it's a lacking of cultural, and there's a lot of sociological studies on it. Crab in a Bucket is a study that Glenn Packian refers to a lot in his Resilient Pastor book. And it's like most people, when they are, of a lower status economically or socially or whatever it might be, when someone gets out, then they tend to get pulled back down. They don't actually tend to get lifted up because there's a bunch of competitive stuff going on. And so so my wife, fought for that. And so we were trying really hard to figure out how do we best do this. Like we wanted this to be bold. I wanted to make a statement like, we are pro women, and the church and the people and the women in our church, I want them to be proud. I don't want our first time having a female preacher be someone from the outside. That was very specific of mine. You bring in Priscilla Shire or you bring in Christine Kane, of course they're going to slay it. And in a sense, they won't push the needle, because most of these complementarian men and women can somehow justify like an outsider coming in and preaching. They have a theological like grid for it. It's usually like, well, they're under the covering of somebody in this world, right? So my big thing was like, no, this is gonna be a homegrown situation. So a couple years into the church, I was at a conference, and the conference was about like healthy teams and healthy leaders. And one of the breakouts was about women and empowering women in ministry and giving them a voice and making sure that you don't just give them a voice, but you allow them to have their own voice. Because there's this whole idea of like, well, let's give this seat to this woman and and it's like, that already has a power dynamic to it. So it's like, no, let them be themselves. Let them be insecure, let them be powerful, let them be strong, like whatever they are, let them sit at the table and be like. So I was sitting there, and we had 2 campuses at the time, and this guy at the table. His name is Pastor Phil. Him and I were talking, and I was like, man, I just like, we so desperately want, and I've got these amazing female leaders in our church. And he was like, why don't you just give Easter Sunday to them?
Oh.
He's like, who were the first 2 people to discover that Jesus was resurrected? I was like, 2 women. He's like, that sounds like a great time.
Wow.
He's like, and then we were talking about it more. And he was like, yeah, it's going to kill your ego because every preacher wants to preach on Easter because it makes them feel really good. Yeah. Like no preacher gives away Easter.
No, it's the busiest day, the biggest day.
Oh, and it makes you feel you're the only you're the only person in your entire church that can save all these lost people. Yeah. You gotta. And he just looked at me and he was like, Josh, when you've preached 30 Easters in your lifetime, you'll realize that it's okay. Like I love being around guys and gals who have been in pastoral ministry long enough that Easter doesn't matter anymore. Like they know that the Sunday after Easter is just as important, that Christmas is Christmas. You know, that's like good. They're so humble, and they also know that they're not that important. Yeah. Like your church one day will not be pastored by you. Yeah. So give up the ring of leadership. Like let it go. Like stop being such an authoritarian, psycho. So it's just so refreshing being around these guys who have just been in leadership for long enough. Like Brady Boyd at New Life Church preaches like 2 times a month because he's just always giving away. Yeah. And it's like, how does Brady have so many world-renowned senior leaders under his leadership? Because he's a man who gives it away and he celebrates it. So, and that was the conference we were at. We were at a New Life conference. And so one of Brady's closest friends, pastors in Seattle, was Phil. He actually still pastors up there right now. And this amazing man. He actually is now co-pastoring with his successor, and he has become only the pastor of evangelism. Oh. And the senior leadership of the church has actually gone to a guy he has homegrown for 15 years. So it's amazing. So he looks at me and he says, why don't you just give him Easter? And I was just like, wow, that's awesome. So had Brianne and Megan, because Megan was with us at our previous church and worked through a sermon for Easter. Wow. So they both preached.
On Easter Sunday.
Easter Sunday. First, imagine that.
Probably the biggest Sunday you had.
Probably. Yeah. I don't really do numbers, though. I don't count. So like, yep. So Megan preached, Brianne preached, and we lost probably 100 people at least.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because again, you're at the church and you're like, this Josh guy, man, he really knows his word. And you don't really ever ask. You don't ever look. Women are, and your wife loves it. And, you think that I'm one thing. And then you bring all of your conservative friends to Easter because you're like, guys, you got to come to this church. It's like all of the, Acts 29 Bible, Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler preaching, but it's also got like Bethel worship stuff going on. You got to, and it's like a bastion for like conservatism until, one of our elders is a female and she's preaching. Because the funny thing is that most of those conservative people in the theological tradition of conservatism, they're not bringing their lost friends to church. No, they're bringing their other Christian friends. Yeah. Like, I hate to say this, but like the majority of conservatives that I meet, and I'm saying conservatives not politically, theologically, most of them believe that their friends just don't go to the right kind of church and they need to come to the right kind of church. So they invite their friends, which the majority of their friends are Christians, and they just do the sheep shuffle. And you see this a lot in like really... like ethnic churches do this all the time. Timothy Keller has a book on Center Church, and he talks about ethnic churches in populated areas where the majority of growth happens not because of lostness, it happens because of ethnic correlation. And this happens with like any group that feels like they're being underrepresented. They tend to be isolated in their life. And so they only invite the very people that they're isolated to, which happens to be people who think like them and look like them and act like them. And so, yeah, we would lose 100 people on an Easter because we did not make the people who made a lot of assumptions about our church. They never read our statement of faith. But we would lose them, And so, like, again, now think about that. So you've got my wife and Megan and all of these female leaders that looked up to them, just so amped out of their minds. This is Easter Sunday. We are like, we've got 800 people or whatever people in the room right now. And they are like, yes, go girl, preach, 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 preach. And then the next week, people that they had seen for months on end at the church are just not there anymore. Think about how unbelievably discouraging that is.
Yeah.
Like,
just because of who you are.
Just because of who you imagine. Like, think about that. Think about if you had a black leader in your church and you put a black person up on stage to preach, and then the very next week, 25 white people left. Yeah. That'd be awful.
Yes.
You'd be like, I don't know if those people love Jesus. Yeah. Like, because at least someone who is in love with Jesus and loves the church, they would stick around and they would wrestle with it. Mm-hmm. They're like, I think that we have a theological disagreement here. Yeah. Is this a primary issue? Is this a gospel issue? And like, the more people you meet that make women in ministry a gospel issue, you start realizing that they actually have a lot more gospel issues on their radar. They're the same people that think that the end times is a gospel issue or that Israel is a gospel issue. And you're like, so is everything a gospel? So everything is a Jesus issue. So basically, if not, I'm not a conservative, pro-Israel, dispensational, kind of pseudo-charismatic, complementarian, Bible, just literalist, 6-day creationist, then I don't love Jesus. Like, oh, now we're fundamentalists. So that's just fundamentalism. Yep. But you have jeans on, so you're just, I guess, not a fundamentalist. Like, I'm a little spicy today. So anyways, so we did that, which was very controversial. Most of the people in our church at that time had no idea that we were controversial because we were a younger church. But the amount of emails, the loss, the heartbreak, the fact that we went from like 30, at that time we had home groups. We went from like 37 home groups to 25 because most of these people were even members of our church. They went through our entire membership process and then they still were shocked.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, but that, I mean, like, it's the unfortunate side of people assume. Mm-hmm. People here at the Vineyard probably have a lot of assumptions. I mean, we've lost people in the last 4 months because of the elections, because people have literally never asked you or me what anybody on our board believes or what any of our pastors believe. And they've just, boop, hop, skipped, and jumped out of our church because they assume, that's the big key word there, they assume that we're like alt-right MAGA conservatives.
Yeah, or the opposite.
Oh my gosh, yeah, or we're flaming liberals. And it's just like, so you've never asked.
No, I've heard both. Especially because you're like the new pastor, and
yeah, no one wants to ask. They just want to assume.
He's too MAGA for us. Oh no, but he's too liberal for us. I mean, you're feeling the burn from back in the day, and you're MAGA at the same time, Josh.
You know what's really a spiritual discipline that I think Christians should learn is called asking questions. Like, it's just, it would be so, well, the problem though is that the people that are like that, because those are the fringy 10% that just want to be insane about their leftism or rightism, they don't live their life asking questions anyways. Yeah. Like the people who, like this will, I mean, if anybody's listening to this and they're a part of that group, this will make them mad no matter what. Those people who are extreme don't live a life of humility regularly. They are not reading an article. Like, they do not actively try to find a middle, like they don't look at the map that shows you like where news stations are and you've got right, left, and they're not actively going for a middle, comparing and analyzing conservative and liberal ideologies, and then realizing that they are leaning one way, but they could see how you can think about that. They're not actively doing that. They go to MSNBC and all they want, or they go to Fox News and all they want. And so to assume that those people will humbly say, hey, Josh, I'd love to know, like, I'm wrestling with the idea of immigration right now and what Trump's doing with blank. Like, what's the scriptures teach on that? Like, you seem to have a decent view of that. I think I can pinpoint you. Let's talk about that. I would love to have that conversation with anybody, but instead it's, oh, Josh and Joel believe blank, therefore blank. And then, like, you know me well enough to know that most of these people assume stuff that is like so unbelievably off of what I believe. Right. Like,
well, they're convinced of things that simply are fascinatingly not only untrue, but just
it also reveals what news station they just watch every day. You're You're like assuming that I'm just something. And it's like the only way that you got that is from listening to that person. Like there's no other solution to that. So we experienced that at our last church with women and with leadership, women in leadership. And it's a hill that it's worth dying on for me.
Yeah, it's very
because
important.
I think that the women of our community need to know, because I'm a strong male, and I think that if I wasn't proactively empowering women, it could be perceived that this is like a dude show. And so you always have to be aware of that. Yeah. Like I want to be cognizant of that stuff. Yeah. So it was worth the cost. Now we're a part of the Vineyards, which is totally different.
We've had full-time women pastors since way before I came.
Well, and nationally, the movement is pro-women. Yep. We've got a whole preaching cohort for women. Mm-hmm. Nationally, our associate national director is Jay's wife. She's an amazing, strong woman. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of nice. Like now, I very much enjoy being a part of a movement where like this is the water I swim in. Mm-hmm. I love that cultural diversity is just normal. Yeah. We sing in different languages. Any national conference, the stage is just a hodgepodge of everybody from everywhere. We're an international movement now. Our national director is not white. Like I love that we're playing in the, like I'm playing soccer on a soccer field now. Like I'm not playing football on a baseball field anymore. Yeah. Like it's really refreshing. Yeah, so Brian, I think that she's, very encouraged. Even Jessie, I think that she was very encouraged to be a part of what we were doing. And
it was rich having her too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was good. So got some ladies, which will be super fun. One day we'll get your daughter up there. Who knows?
Oh.
No, she won't do. She won't even do the response time right now.
She has so many convictions. She's amazingly gifted, but
it'll be fun. No, we'll get Shannon up there. That'll be great. Because what was it? 2 weeks ago, she led a little moment for us, which was great. It was very powerful. Maybe it was 3 weeks ago.
A couple, yeah.
It was when she was referring to Psalm 23, Lord is my shepherd stuff, and then he has a rod and he's protecting and guiding and all that.
Beautiful.
That was a
good
good
song right after that. Was all about the rod and the exact thing she said, and she didn't know what song that was.
Yeah, well, when she came up and told me what she felt like the Lord was saying, then I don't think I told her, but I knew what song it was, and I was like, oh, that'd be perfect. Like she did a really good job with that, which was super fun. So what can we expect this week, Joel Moses? We are making some dang good progress on this building. We're like
so good.
Yeah, we're almost
new sign.
One, almost got the second one.
So we almost have the second. Well, we do have the second one on top, like the long one.
Oh, right. We got 3.
There are 3 signs.
Yeah.
So we have the last one coming in this week.
Yep.
Probably. Downstairs looks so good. Mm-hmm. Floor's done. Mm-hmm. LED walls getting repositioned this week.
A whole new, if those who have been watching and you're like, what happened to the stage? We had to lift the stage, widen the stage, repaint the stage, do brand new everything.
New lights.
Now we're going to do we're going to do the LED wall and brand new lighting.
Yeah, not a brand new LED wall, but
LED wall we've had, and we'll be able to reposition it and honestly make it more epic because our ratios will be better.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah, it'll be super cool.
Bathrooms are done. If you haven't, on a Sunday morning, use the restroom. It's amazing.
Drink a lot of water or coffee and enjoy one of those bathrooms. Yeah.
And
they're very beautiful.
Yeah.
Megan did a good job with those.
Yeah, it's all coming together.
And the gallery is getting pretty good, adding windows, some natural lighting for the first time in I think about 40 years. Found out that there were windows that got covered with drywall. So we popped those out.
Right to the street.
Which is great. Yeah. So we'll do those and lots of stuff. People are getting excited.
Yes.
Hopefully the kids space will be done by Easter. Done is relative. Everything is done other than the playground.
Right.
But once that playground gets in, ooh-wee.
Yes.
My boys, yesterday I was talking with them. I was like, hey, like what are some things that you feel like we should still do in the kids space? Like what are some things that can get you really excited? And they were both like, when's the playground coming? And I was like, yeah, I know.
It's going to be so good.
Yeah, it'll be really good.
Great stuff happening. Lots of new people. And
you launched 2 new communities. You've got one for parents with little kiddos.
Little steps.
Yeah. And then you've got a young professionals, 30s. Yeah.
Lots of, that first community is this Wednesday. So this week.
Yeah.
And super excited about that. and the little steps, all the brand new first-time parents.
Yes.
It's been so rich.
Yeah.
We have a good time together. I'm not a first-time parent, obviously.
No.
Empty nesters, but
the first-time parents need a not first-time parent
Right.
to facilitate.
Yeah,
so that way
such
they
a
realize.
so fun. We have like 10 little infants and babies in our house,
Wow.
and no one's thrown a fit. Like no baby even cries.
Just wait though.
I know, but the first 2 or 3 meetings we've had,
They're just
little
babies doing their thing.
Perfectly.
I don't think little babies are that challenging. It's like month 7.
Probably.
Unless a baby's colicky. Like we had a colicky kid. Asher was colicky. Oh, it was a night. We couldn't go anywhere.
It's hard.
But yeah, most of them, I think it's right when they get to that 8 month, then they're teething and you're like, oh no, here we go.
It's so fun.
They start doing sleep training and all that stuff.
It's been really good.
Yeah. So cool, man. We got a lot going on. We've got Encounter Night in 2 weeks. Building is almost really getting close, which is awesome.
Kingdom Sessions again,
which is going to be great.
We got 14 or 15 new volunteers last month.
That's amazing.
So the month of February.
I have 15 new guest videos I have to film today from yesterday.
Wow.
So, I mean, we're having to add chairs every week. The last 4 weeks, we've been adding chairs. We'll have to do that again.
You can't really tell.
You can't tell. Well, the new chairs, they are exactly what I described. You will never know that we're adding these chairs, but our capacity is increasing quite a bit, which is always, I mean, that's what we talked about in November, is like we just have to, our rate of growth is so quick. We don't want to start turning people away in 3 months. Like,
that's right.
So there's a lot going on, which is really good.
Yeah.
So, So we got Good Friday in a couple weeks, probably 4 weeks from now, 5 weeks. It's 40 days from Lent. So when is, well, that was, so it's going to be 5 weeks.
Probably 5.
Good Friday.
Yeah. Kingdom Sessions coming.
Yeah. 14
new volunteers last month. And my goal for March is 20. That's going to be hard, but then we would be so positioned so that all of our volunteers. Well,
the amount of new people we have coming, though, bro.
I know.
Like anybody's listening says, if you're new, volunteering is amazing and relatively easy, especially if they do the quick. Like we're building a security team.
Yep.
If you want to be on security, we'd love to have that. A greeting and a ushering is one of those, like, you don't miss anything other than the first song.
No, there was someone who stepped into, I think he'd been at our church once, and he decided to join the parking lot team.
Which is amazing.
And he was blown away that all it means is you come 20 minutes early and you stand in the parking lot and
make sure people are safe.
Yeah. Yep. You get to walk people across the street with a stop sign.
Yep.
And he was
lots
like,
of opportunities. 15 to 20 new volunteers would be very easy given the fact that we've got about 75 new people a month.
Yeah.
And any of those people could easily, percentage-wise, right? Like if I'm doing 15 connection cards just from yesterday, I mean, that's 15 people that want to get connected to this church, which is like they're all then going to be pretty ready to do something at least in the short term.
It's very fascinating. Like I said a few weeks ago, a lot of the new people coming really are
eager.
Yep. And like almost immediately.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah. They're not like testing the water. They're not being passive. They're not being real spectator mentality.
I think that we're meeting a felt need. I don't know if it's all of them would say that they've like had a radical encounter with Jesus while they got prayed for. Some I think would say that, but I think some are just saying, I'm finally not lonely, or wow, I just get so much out of the service. I think that there's just a couple of ways that we're meeting the needs of people, and that makes them want to do this. And it's hard to find a church in Los Angeles because the city's so dang big. Yeah. It's hard to find a church that's healthy, vibrant, and still has capacity for you. Because a lot of the healthy, vibrant churches in our city are already maxed. And everybody, a lot of people would say there's so many churches on the west side. And it's like, no, because the percentage is insane. Like, Vintage is the biggest church on the west side by far. And they're not even tapping into 2% of the area. Zoe's healthy, Mosaic's healthy. You've got Renew. You've got a collective church. But if everybody was at max capacity, I mean, this is what's so hard about being in big cities, is everybody that is wanting Jesus wants a really good, healthy, vibrant opportunity, and then you're looking at the opportunities, and it's like, okay, you're going to go into a room that's just crammed, packed. It's like New York. Like, the healthy, amazing churches in New York, like it's almost impossible to find a space, because when something is healthy and vibrant, it grows, especially in a post-Christian culture.
Yeah.
It's just so hard. So it's like we are strangely in a point where it's like, if you're looking for a faith community, whether you're not a Christian or you're curious about Christianity, or you've been a faithful Christian and you're moving to the area, this is kind of like your time.
Prime time.
This year, not even this year, the next 6 months are like, this is a good time to come, because we're building stuff still, and we would be glad to build with you. But at some point come October, November, a lot of our rhythms will be pretty established, and it might be hard to find seating. It might, because our building only sits 360 people. Like, we could be a church of 700, which is only that's half the size of Vintage, but we're maxed at that moment. So it's like, this is the time. Like, great if you want to get in, this is a great time. The other times that this happens, at least in my experience, ministry wise, it's when you plant a campus, it's when you plant a church, it's when you somehow have the ability to build a new building. Those are those moments when you've made space. But we're right there right now. Like, this is a make space moment for the church, and we've got it. And at the rate we're growing at, I don't know how long it would just be, maybe a year. With ebbs and flows. So great time for people, for sure. Amazing stories. Got tons of people who want to get baptized, so we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
The next time we'll do that. We just aren't in a rhythm of doing consistent baptisms, because our building has been so in disarray. Yeah. And my ministry model is baptize when the maximum amount of people see it. I know historically our church has done beach baptisms, and I know that was a tradition, but I think the biggest win of all time is a baptism, and that you need the most eyes to see the most wins. Because when the people of our church see 25 people get baptized, they're going to be like, what is happening here? And that's the crescendo of everything that we do, is baptisms. It's the celebration.
We're going to have a lot, because we have, like, the growth we're seeing right now is some new people that moved to the area, but it's also who are Christians, who are already following Jesus. But we have a lot of very curious people who haven't yet. Really. A lot of new people, and a lot of people that are just wondering, who is Jesus, and is he real, and
is he worth following?
Yeah, that's the authentic West Side.
That's correct.
And so many. I think most of our visitors from yesterday, as I was looking at some Connect cards, they're almost all from the neighborhood.
Yes.
From like the neighborhood, I recognize the street names.
Yes.
All within a mile away.
Yes.
And these are people that probably aren't coming from some other church.
No.
They're coming because
they're coming from another
market.
Spiritual experience.
Something, yeah.
I mean, LA is super spiritual.
Very spiritual.
That's statistic. Brianne was actually just doing a presentation with Ed Stetzer, who's a huge church missiologist, and they were at a conference last week. And Ed was like, 63% of this generation is spiritually interested. However, they don't have Christian background. They don't actually have any traditional religious background. So unless you grew up Muslim or Buddhist or Christian or Jewish, if you didn't grow up in it, then you are dabbling in all things right now. It's like I was writing a little thing a couple weeks ago about just like, it was like a joke, but it was like, it's not weird at all for someone in our area to go to like a weird shaman experience and simultaneously come to church on Sunday.
Oh, yeah.
And debate, is the God that shaman says I can become the same God that Jesus demands me to follow? But I'm experiencing something here that I think I experienced. They're dealing with that like polytheology, like the weird, is this, which God is the true God? Elijah moment, right? Like, do we need to call down some fire on this altar and hope that the prophets of Baal don't actually cut themselves this time? Like, we need to avoid that. But like, that's what we get in our city, which is very fascinating. You don't usually meet the hardened atheist whose spouse is forcing them to come. You're getting a spiritually curious.
Yeah, who's curious because their last tarot reading was eerily familiar, but not as powerful as the prayer time they experienced on Sunday.
Yeah.
So they're
Which one of these days we're going to need to do a podcast on just like the importance of classic Vineyard theology and the belief of power, and how in the 70s it worked, and we're just there again. The Cultural Revolution. This again, Ed was talking about this last week as in one of his stats. He said every 60 years, culture doesn't repeat itself, but it has the same rhythm. Like, so it doesn't always. It's not the same. It's not the chorus over and over again, but it's the verse.
Okay.
So because the lyrics change, something subtly, the melody isn't quite the same, but it's a verse again. And he said 60 years ago, there was a massive revolt and a revolutionary change and a heightened interest in the power of God manifest in our world. And he said all of those same expectations are rising again in all the stats. So there's just this like, just insatiable desire for. This is why literally right next to the bar we go to, I was about to say all the time, sometimes.
We did want.
Yeah. Right next to it is the
huge.
Buddhist and the tarot reading and the
psychic.
The whole room is white and she's got like all these weird things and literally right next to our normal person bar and like a interesting like family owned Italian restaurant.
Yep, all right there.
Right there. And it's like you go down to Abbot Kinney, that's like every other shop is some weird experience the divine version of you, right? So it's fun stuff. So, and hopefully we'll have our coffee shop open sometime near Easter-ish. Start building rapport with people. Yes, it's looking so good. Lots of good stuff. So anything else we're missing, Joel, or are we good?
Nope, I think we're good.
Alrighty, friends.
Thanks if you got this far. Thank you.
Yeah. We had to make up for last week. So, all right. We'll see you guys